we, talk all about these great learning principles for students, and it's less often that we really implement that for adult learning, like giving them time to create and give feedback and talk to each other and collaborate instead of just sit and get in the same room all day long.
That was the last time I got dysentery.
Welcome, everybody, back to another Undisrupted podcast brought to you by the friends at the Oregon Trail. No, not really. Adam, dysentery aside, I was at a training recently, a staff development training. I got to go to a school district, and this teacher came up to me. She's like, I got to share this with you. We just totally use this. And she shows me her phone, and on her phone is this thing called professional development bingo, and I've got some of them here pulled up, and actually some of the phrases are like turn to your elbow partner, or I know you need a plan, but, or we're building the plane as we're flying it, and things like that. And also remember the norms, self-care is important, blah 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 blah. And so I started thinking that there's a lot of buzzwords out there, and by the way, I of course took this as a challenge that I needed to hit every single one of those in the first 2 minutes. To do a coverall. What? That
sounds like an edtech poetry slam. Working all those buzzwords into a poem.
Yeah, we need that. We need that at the next poetry slam. Yeah, the buzzword poem. What are your thoughts on this? On the buzz? We've always been. I mean, and we're not the only industry, obviously. That's regulated to all these interesting buzzwords. Although we seem to have a lot of them in education. What are your thoughts on buzzwords?
If it only stops with the word, that's when I have a problem with it. If we're just using the word for the sake of using the word and including it, I have a problem with it. It's because there's nothing wrong with any of those buzzwords because they mean a lot. If you say self-care is very important, especially coming out of the 2020 year and where we are now and the stressors that people have. So self-care, once again, if you're just using it as a buzzword, problem. But if you have something internally built into your school system to support and provide self-care opportunities or structure around that, I'm all for it. Just like turn into your shoulder buddy. Yeah, turn into your shoulder buddy is a thing. But if you're just going through the motions and not supporting that with your structure in your delivery of your PL, PD, and also showing teachers how to utilize that strategy within their classroom, that's the problem. If you're just saying it and you're not actually doing what you say, that's where I have an issue with the buzzword bingo lingo that we use.
My favorite is when it's like, make sure you're practicing self-care and make sure you get these 500 things done before tomorrow.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, we want you to do both things. Yes, we need to keep students as the focus and be solutions focused. We're all professionals here, so don't get too comfy because we want to volunteer next. Yeah, those are some other ones there. So exactly. Let me welcome into the, yeah.
I was just going to say the cousin of buzzwords is also the acronyms. And we are just like rife with acronyms.
That's a good way of saying it. The cousin. That's right. That voice you hear on the podcast host is Zareen Pooneen Levien. She's the director of digital learning at San Francisco Unified. Thank you for joining the podcast. Yeah, Zareen. So there's a lot of buzzwords in this industry, and I think, I mean, what are you? I mean, you provide professional learning. I assume all, and that's not a small district up there in San Francisco.
A little tiny district.
Well, there is San Francisco, Texas, so I want to make sure they know this is the one in California. Because
the other, she's at the other San Francisco. She's the other San Francisco.
Yeah, exactly.
Texas does their own thing, so that's the real San Francisco, right?
There we go. So, yeah, how do you manage that? I mean, you want to be authentic to the audience, to the adults that you're teaching. So, how do you do that in a way that's like? But you also want to recognize, like, these are the things we're going to talk about, and you don't want to make it too buzzwordy. Because then I'll tell you the other thing I just saw the other day. Someone had a meme. It was like when I walk into a PD and I see 4 pieces of chart paper in the corners and stickers on the thing. We're like, oh boy, here we go. Like no teacher wants to walk into that. And I'm like, well, there's some uses of that too, though, right?
Yeah.
Right. And I think it's really I think you hit on it. It's like really thinking about your audience. It's like when you're with one audience, you're talking at a higher level, and that gets to what you were saying, Adam. It's like sometimes you're talking at a high level because you're thinking about the whole district. But when you're when you're working with teachers, you have to really think about what's going to be relevant for them immediately. And sometimes it's even about doing that translation. It's like, the district is talking about these things and these buzzwords and like calling it out. And here's how we're going to make it actionable in your classroom. And here's what it means for you.
I like that. Don't avoid it. Like actually run into it and say, hey, here are the things. And these are the things you're probably hearing. What do these actually mean to you? And what are the steps that you're going to take to make these things happen in your classrooms? I like that.
Right.
It's so funny you talk about that because I know I had one of my tweets that I sent out. It was still a tweet at that time. I don't know what we're calling them now,
but it was an X tweet.
It was a throwaway post that I made about how teachers don't have time at the start of their school year because they're jam packed with everything. And tons of people saw the tweet. I was like, oh, wow. It just really struck a chord with a lot of folks. And one of the things that people were pointing out was, necessary professional learning. And I didn't intend for people to go that route because I'm a huge fan of professional learning.
Yeah.
Because we all need to grow. We all need that opportunity. But there's a lot of teachers that feel, I should say a lot. There are teachers who feel some kind of way about professional learning, especially at the beginning of a school year. So let me ask you this, Zareen. With that being said, how do you think schools should really look at beginning of the year professional learning and also throughout the school year? What does that look like? What should that look like?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think it's really about timing that you kind of were saying. So we're actually just planning for our beginning of school year event called Digital District Day, and we have it every year. It's an online kind of mini conference for all of our teachers in San Francisco Unified, where we talk about all different digital learning topics. It's actually the day before teachers come back, and they get paid an extra stipend for coming. And I say that because I think what happens in that kind of first week before school, there's so much for teachers to do, and we're trying to get them to do professional learning and think about big picture things, envisioning and going, and they need to set up their classroom and get to know their students. And so thinking about where they are and carving out enough time for them to do that. And if the professional learning we do, again, making it really like actionable. So it relates to their first week of school. That's where their head is. So yes, we want to do that big picture, but I think having more time, we always want more time, but thinking about like, when we're approaching teachers and what's going to be top of mind for them. And even if that can't be all of what we do in the professional learning, acknowledge that and have some time for what they're thinking about. And then as much as possible, having professional learning throughout the year, not just that one time at the beginning of the year is the only time we can do it.
Yeah, you have all those mandatory bloodborne pathogen type things that you have to kind of get through, right? And then, but then at the same time, like the schedule I was just looking at the school I was with this week, they have 10 days of prep before the first day. The kids come in on August 15th, and so they have 10 days that they're getting prepared. And I looked at the schedule. I had a teacher say, "Pull up your schedule. I want to look at it." And there was maybe 2 half days where they could be in their classrooms, but the rest of the time they're always pulled out for stuff. And we're on day 3 by the time I was there, and they're like, we're already like overwhelmed and school hasn't started yet. And we have parents coming into kids. And so it's almost like we try to do this in my district. We try to strike a balance of like, all right, every hour that we take you out, we're going to give you an hour back. Cause like you said, Zareen, that time is finite. So finding that balance and while still getting in all those things. I love the idea of doing it throughout the year though. Yeah, you're right. We can't overwhelm them all at the beginning.
Well, you mentioned something about the bloodborne pathogen, and what I saw one district do that was very an interesting take on it. It was they paid the teachers to go through those videos. They did say schools, and you got paid an extra stipend to go through that. And the thought process behind that was if you had a regular 9-to-5 job and you had to go in for training, you are paid for that. It's you go in, you do your training before you start work. You're paid for that. But oftentimes for that kind of training with our teachers, we expect them to do that whenever. We like fit it in your day whenever. And when they do that, then it becomes I'm just going to play it and clean my room or grade papers, or they're doing it at home, or they're doing it during the lunch. So it's they're making their uptime to do that, and they're not being compensated for that. And so the district was like, hey, if you just go through it, we'll compensate you. Once you sign off on it, that you've done it, here's your check for, if it's 8 hours, that's an 8-hour day, quote unquote, you're paid for by doing those videos on their own. So, and money isn't the driver for everything. But I think sometimes this showing people that your time is worth, if you have the resources, that also makes teachers feel appreciated.
I'm going to add on to that and say, I think money is great, and having good food goes a long way.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, it just feels like you're honoring your time and making you kind of have a good experience.
Well, and you're right in the heart of all that with the Silicon Valley stuff, because one thing I visited Apple and also Google's campuses up there. And that's one thing that they have consistently is like, we're going to provide adult, like these aren't just like little snack bars that you find that have been sitting in a closet for like 3 years. No, they have like little micro kitchens. They have, you can grab sodas. And it's funny how just that little bit of like saying, we're going to honor you as an adult and actually give you some food and, and have food brought in. it's like, we're going to honor your time in that way. Because the other thing is, if you don't do that, what do they do at lunch when you're doing a full day thing? They all take off, and then maybe they come back, an hour late sometimes, or maybe they won't come back after lunch. And so giving them that food also keeps them there, I think, in some ways too, and it gives them a chance to have conversations with colleagues, which I think is important.
I was just going to say the professional learning time itself too. I mean, we, talk all about these great learning principles for students, and it's less often that we really implement that for adult learning, like giving them time to create and give feedback and talk to each other and collaborate instead of just sit and get in the same room all day long.
It's a personalized, right? I mean, we talk about, that's a buzzword that we hear a lot, and I know it's one that you guys have focused on a lot there at SFUSD. Tell me about that personalized learning. And also give me kind of the lens of what does it mean for the students, but also for the teachers there, because I think it's important to say, I think you have to also practice it with them, right? So we all say we do it, or we want to do it. I mean, I've been in schools for, 2 decades, and it's like, yes, we're going to personalize learning for kids. I don't know that we've actually ever really done it. I think we've tried to check a box that says that we're doing it, or we're trying to do it. So how do you make it happen? How do you make that happen? And how do you know that it's actually happening in your schools?
Yeah, we've been doing personalized learning for a long time in different ways. We started out about 6 or 7 years ago with a personalized learning environments pilot for many of our elementary schools, where we were using digital tools and flexible seating arrangements to help teachers kind of shake up their practice in a way and think more about student learning and actually talk to their students, do things like empathy interviews, and really hear from the students what is working for them. And we had a lot of kind of realizations through that process of teachers finding out, they teach first grade, and they found out this set of students, they really think and participate better when they're moving around. It's not the traditional looking classroom where they're all like sitting and looking attentive, but this student, when they're like bouncing around, they're actually paying attention better. And so the teachers started to have that perspective of like really thinking about their students and asking them and having students actually build those skills of self-reflection to know when they learn the best and what distracts them. And so we started that off as a pilot, and now it's kind of become built into our program. And we're trying to kind of put that at a broader level for all of our teachers as we think about deeper learning and how digital tools can help enable that.
I love that. Yeah, you do. And I love that you also said it's not every kid. So when, there's a few kids maybe like to move and have a little bit of movement, but not every kid, right? So that doesn't mean that every kid needs to have the same, hokey stool that they can all wobble on, because some kids learn standing, some kids learn sitting in a regular chair. Yeah. And I think we sometimes, and I know you guys have done a lot of work on the furniture space too, at San Francisco. So I think it's interesting that you have that differentiation, that personalization, even when it comes to the actual physical things in the building and in the classroom for those kids.
Yeah, and it's been really interesting because we did that all kind of before the pandemic, and then we came back and we all had to be like isolated and 6 feet apart.
Yeah.
And it kind of like shook up all of those ideas. But we found that those mindsets of really like being student focused carried those teachers who had gone through that training through the pandemic in a different way than we saw happening with other teachers. And now we're, at this interesting crossroad where we have this foundation in digital learning that everyone was forced to do during the pandemic. And then some came back from it and kind of went much farther with it and said, wow, these tools were great and I'm going to use them much deeper. And some people went the opposite direction. And I really feel like now there's an even greater divide in terms of what teachers are doing in classrooms with digital learning. And so we have an initiative in San Francisco where we have some new getting started guides to kind of level that playing field and really help teachers know, like, these are the basic things that we hope students will do at each grade level. And it's grade level specific. So first graders, we expect them to be doing these things. And it's really setting up students to be the thinkers, not just the consumers. And, like, you would never do what we're doing with digital learning with reading. You would say, like, over here, this classroom, they're going really deep into structured phonics and decoding and reading comprehension. And this classroom over here, they're just going to play with books for a while and we'll see what happens. And that's kind of what we're doing with computers and digital learning.
True.
And we really want to get to that coherence across.
That's very true.
Yeah. And it's interesting because Carl and you were mentioning about, the different makeups of your population and everything. And so when we start talking about diverse backgrounds, you have quite a diverse background. Yes. You've worked at Yahoo. For those of you who don't know, you're also a singer, a filmmaker, and an elementary teacher. So how do you think, all of those different experiences has led you in your current role?
Yeah, it's been a great, great journey. And I really think that teachers are kind of masters of all trades. And I think the great teachers that I know have all of these different passions, and they're artists and they're performers. It really feels like all part of the same package to me in a way. I started off my career at Yahoo, and I love technology, and I've always loved technology. And through a program there, I started volunteering at a school, and I was just blown away by the complexity and the joy and the sparks of learning. And I thought, wow, this is for me. But I had that technology background, and I really was making those connections even in my early teaching career about like how digital learning can help inspire kids and show their creativity. And then, as you mentioned, I'm a singer and a filmmaker, and I did that with my students as well, because I get so much joy from that. And I saw that different students are sparked by different things. And when we allow students these different opportunities, for some students, they love reading and they want to read all day, and that's great. And then for these other students, maybe reading doesn't come as easily for them, and they're always kind of the ones left out in those classrooms that are, reading is so important, and I love reading too. And then what about a chance for this student to shine, who's such a great singer or performer or speaker or filmmaker? And so my husband is also a filmmaker, and so we've made some films together. We've made some films about education. We have a short film called Immersion Film. It's at immersionfilm.com, and it's about English language learners, and it's been used in a lot of teacher training programs. So just think about, it's actually really related to what we were talking about, thinking about your students' perspective and how they perceive the world, and how we can really help support them and connect them to others.
That's cool, because when you think about teaching, it's all about building those relationships. We talk about the different R's in education, but relationships, you have to have that. Even when you're talking about professional learning, you have to have a relationship with your staff to understand how the professional learning should be delivered, where their needs are. Same thing with students, because you can have all these great ideas, but if you haven't built the relationships to get that buy-in, they're not going to do it. You're going to have pushback. You're like, oh my gosh. Just like you were mentioning earlier, Carl, with the Post-it notes. If your staff or people feel as though like, oh, here we go again, they're going to go through the motions, but the learning won't be there.
Yeah. And I think that's interesting too, in a medium like film, where now we have such short form film is becoming such available with TikTok and Instagram Reels and things like that. How are you leveraging that at all? Because I feel like you have that the broader filmmaker background, which is just a lot more intense, obviously, than doing a quick little TikTok video. But, film and video really inspire us in a lot of ways. Are you guys using that? Are you using it at all for stuff you're doing at SFUSD? I'd be curious to hear.
Yeah, I definitely bring that into my practice now as well. Video is such a powerful tool for us to really see what's happening. And actually, especially during the pandemic, we were trying to do all this professional development, and we used to do a really strong peer observation cycle. And it was amazing. We would go into each other's classrooms, people would go to different schools, and all of that became impossible. So we started using video, and we found that, it's always better to be in person to see things, but it allowed for so much connection between our teachers. So we started having teachers just record themselves, like open a Zoom meeting and record their own classroom and use that to share with each other. And we got so much positive feedback. And it was so easy for teachers to do too. It didn't feel like a lot of pressure, as you might feel if a whole group is walking into your classroom. So to just have that be more part of the regular cycle. And when I was a coach at a school, we did quite a bit of that too. And I've used it now to really document best practices as well, so that we can see all the great things that are happening. And I think, as much as we talk about the opportunities and what we can do with digital learning and personalized learning, there is so much amazing work happening in so many classrooms. And teachers, I think, sometimes don't even know how amazing they are. And so part of what I love to do is video them and document their practice and share it with others and elevate it so that we can all learn from each other.
I love that background there. And I noticed also that SFUSD is an ISTE Distinguished District. I was doing some digging. 2021, you're recognized as a Distinguished District. For those out there listening, because we're future ready, but we're also friends with ISTE, and Adams, of course, is still on the ISTE board, and they haven't fired him from his volunteer job yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. The power of yet. Tell us about that distinction, and then also like what does it mean? How did you earn it? And then also like how does it benefit maybe you or your district in terms of learning and things like that?
Yeah, we love ISTE. The ISTE student standards and teacher standards are really powerful, and I think they really lead towards a lot of these things that we were talking about. Through the pandemic, we did a lot of really hard work, as a lot of us were working really hard. We did a lot of really hard work with access for students, and now we're moving towards one-to-one post-pandemic. And during the pandemic, of course, we all had to kind of go down that path. We also did a lot of work with digital citizenship, making sure all students really had that consistent access to digital citizenship lessons. And then we did a lot of professional development. We have a personalized learning environments program that I spoke about. We also have a digital learning facilitators program, which gets back to the earlier comment. Our acronym for that is DLEAF.
There we go. Oh, that's a new one. Yeah.
Program has a tech lead, basically a digital learning lead in each school in the whole district, and then we have monthly professional development meetings. So and those follow along the path of what ISTE kind of recommends with their standards, although we translate it a little bit into San Francisco speak, as we like to do. And I have to mention Melissa Dodd, who has been our technology, and Lindsay Blass, who was the previous director of digital learning, who really led a lot of that work through the pandemic and led the work for becoming an ISTE distinguished district.
I got the chance to meet Lindsay and you on that previous episode. And then Melissa, we've known her since her Boston days, but we haven't had her on the show yet, Adam. I just realized that. Hopefully she's not getting too mad at Zareen that we went ahead and put her on. She got to get on the episode before Melissa did. That's good.
Dude, I'm sure. She's a very, very busy person, so you'll maybe get her.
I would imagine, yes.
See, Carl, you started all this drama with people we've had on and
I know. I should stop that. I did that on a previous episode. I should stop doing that.
I know somebody's going to run up on us at the next conference.
Yeah, smack us in the back of the head. Yes.
And they're like, "Where's the microphone? Get it out!"
Yeah.
But we can maybe just use AI and get them on. Because AI is everywhere. So we'll just have we'll just record them.
Box. It has been brought up on the podcast now. Yes.
So Zareen, of course, being in Silicon Valley, and with AI, of course, just being on the tips of everyone's tongue, in the front of everyone's mind right now. What have you seen in your current space as it pertains to AI, and how do you see your school district kind of implementing or supporting the use of AI in this coming school year?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think obviously it's on everybody's mind in education and in many industries, thinking about how artificial intelligence will play a role. And I think at this point we're exploring it like many other districts, and we're thinking about it first as a tool for teachers. There's many things about artificial intelligence that can make teachers more efficient, doing a lot of rote tasks, developing agendas for things or repeated communications, that it can be really helpful. So trying to help teachers understand how the tool works and use it themselves for a little bit more kind of efficiency, so that it frees their time up to do some more of that personalization and differentiation for students and more communication with parents and all those really human tasks that will never go away. But what can artificial intelligence help us with being more efficient with? And then secondarily, I think really helping us all understand what it means for our students to grow up now. So different from when we grew up. And I know we always say that, but now more than ever, with artificial intelligence being ingrained in everything, students don't have to memorize things. Their access to information is just exploding. They have to know how to ask the right questions. And so we have to help prepare our students, practice that in schools. So really we're shifting the mindsets of teachers and of students. And so rather than thinking about like, oh, we're so worried that they're going to cheat and they're going to get things. That's what we were saying about Google 15 years ago. Oh no, they can search for information. And so we have to shift our mindsets to think about like, how do we help students understand new technology, approach it with an open mind, approach it with an ethical questioning, think about collaborating, share ideas about how they think it's useful, and how can we make our schools change to support that? Our schools have to prepare our students for the future, even though the future is more unknown than ever. We have to make that shift so that we can really be equitable and prepare our students properly.
Yeah. It's a lot to take in when you think about all the different things. You're talking a lot about how it kind of can save us some time with the efficiency, which I think is good too. And I think that it helps us, as adults, too, professionals that are having to manage all of these things. One thing we like to ask our guests is kind of one of our wrap-up questions is, you have a lot thrown at you. You wear a lot of hats. You have a very diverse background, as we already talked about. What do you do personally? How do you keep yourself undisrupted? Like, how do you keep yourself just like pushing the noise away? Like, what are some things you do and that our other tech leaders out there can listen to and maybe get some advice from, besides singing, which we know? Yeah.
Yes, I do.
We won't sing. We won't sing.
No.
I spend time with my family. I have 2 kids who are 10 and 12 who definitely keep me on my toes, but they also keep me sort of connected to youth and to kind of what they're thinking about. And I also am a huge fan of soccer. I play soccer once a week with the team of women. And I was just at the Women's World Cup in New Zealand. And that was amazing.
Wow.
So I think just having those things that bring you joy that are separate from work and that keep you active and that keep you engaged with your community, I think are wonderful.
What do you think of the Women's World Cup team? Because there's a lot of drama about that. I mean, I know they got some of the past players giving them some grief about how they didn't do too well in the pre-qualifying rounds. Quick take for our soccer fans on the podcast. Yeah.
I love the women's team. I think they're so amazing. Big fan of Alex Morgan as a mentor and
she's awesome.
Some of those players and Rose Lavelle, and then these new players. Oh man, Sophia Smith, Trinity Rodman. I just love seeing how they're growing, and I think it is a transition time where they have these veterans and these new players, and they're all super talented. But I think they're still working to find their flow and to find their really gelling on the field and figure out. One of my favorite things that I always binge on is whenever they have a little U.S. women's team video about the moms on the team and how these moms are so amazing, like Alex Morgan and some of the others who have just recently, Julie Ertz, and who have just recently had babies, and they're amazing athletes, and they're doing both of those things. And I have 2 boys, and I just love the way that they think about women's sports now. I was hanging out with my son the other day, and he was playing FIFA on the soccer video game, but he chose the women's team instead of the men's. And I was like, oh, that's cool. He's like, yeah, of course, because the Women's World Cup is going on, so I'm going to play women's FIFA. I was like, that's so cool. Like, he doesn't think about it the same way that I did as a kid even. So I'm just excited to see how this brings women's sports and gender. It has it gives us all kind of some new input on women athletes.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, I like your analogy too when you were talking about not even an analogy, like how you have the veterans gelling with the rookies coming in. Sounds very eerily similar to a school campus or a school team. You have your veterans, and it takes a while sometimes for them to gel, and it takes work and effort, and it doesn't happen just on the very first game or the first day of school. So yeah, that's cool. I love that you're into that too. And I think it's important for our leaders out there listening to this to know that you have to have those hobbies. You have to have those passion things that are maybe very far off of anything when it has to do with what your actual day-to-day job is. But I want to thank you for being a part of it. Tell us a little bit real quickly before we go, what are some things you're working on? What are some things that are coming out? Tell us where we can find out more about you and the work that you're doing at SFUSD.
Yeah, great. So I mentioned a little bit earlier, but I'm excited about a couple of new projects at SFUSD, and they're open. We shared a lot of resources during distance learning, and I just love sharing resources, and I would love to hear from other districts if you want to share things back with me. But at SFUSD, we have our Getting Started guides, and that's available for people. It's sfusd.edu/tech-guides. And there's guides for K through 5 there for getting started with technology. And then we have our digital citizenship curriculum, and we call it digital agency, just thinking about how citizenship has some connotations for some people, especially a lot of our immigrant families. And so sfusd.edu/digital-agency, we have some new resources there. We're doing a lot of new lessons about my digital life. So thinking about students' lives that are really separate from their school and their home, and trying to honor the digital life that they have and incorporate that into how we know our students deeply, and a lot of parent communication. So families need to be part of this conversation. And so we have some family resources there too.
I love that you put all this out there, and it's an amazing website, guys. I've been checking it out, the digital curriculum guides. This is a digital agency. I like that change, that turn of phrase, very slight and subtle, but at the same time, I mean, empowering in a lot of ways too. And like you said, there's also some students that maybe hear that phrase citizenship and think differently of it than we do. So I like that you guys are taking that into consideration. Well, we're going to put those links in the show notes, folks, for those that are listening. And of course, we want to thank Zareen and everyone else for joining and listening to this episode of Undisrupted. For our listeners out there, be sure to subscribe and like, and check out the video version on YouTube. You never know what you might find in the background videos there, and Adam's weird shelf that he's got all sorts of little nuggets hiding back there. This has been the Undisrupted podcast, brought to you by All for Ed. He's Adam, and you can follow him at AskAdam3.
And he's Carl, and you can follow him at Mr. Hooker. And remember, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls of all ages, we are better together.
And we are better
undisrupted.